My 38th birthday was supposed to be simple. I never cared much about big celebrations, but my wife, Megan, insisted on throwing a huge party. She rented a private event space overlooking the river, invited dozens of friends and family members, and spent weeks planning every detail. Everyone kept telling me how lucky I was to have a wife willing to go to such lengths. I smiled and thanked them, but deep down, things between Megan and me hadn't felt right for a long time. Over the previous year, she had become distant, impatient, and strangely secretive. Small arguments turned into cold silences. Affection became rare. Whenever I tried talking about it, she blamed stress or work pressure. I wanted to believe her because the alternative was too painful to consider. So when the party arrived, I convinced myself maybe this was her way of reconnecting with me. Maybe tonight would remind us both why we got married in the first place. The evening started beautifully. Friends filled the room, music played softly, and people laughed while sharing stories about old memories. Megan looked stunning in a black dress that immediately drew compliments from everyone who saw her. For the first hour, everything felt normal. She smiled, greeted guests warmly, and even held my hand a few times. I started relaxing. Maybe I had been overthinking things. Maybe we really were just going through a rough patch. Then the doors opened, and a man I recognized immediately walked inside. It was Ryan, Megan's ex-boyfriend. The same ex she had once described as the one who got away during an argument years earlier. I felt my stomach tighten. I hadn't invited him. In fact, I was certain nobody from my side of the guest list even knew him. Yet there he was, smiling confidently as he walked straight toward Megan. The change in her was instant. The moment Megan saw Ryan, her entire face lit up. It wasn't the polite smile people give old acquaintances. It was excitement. Genuine excitement. She hurried across the room and hugged him tightly. Too tightly. Too comfortably. Guests nearby noticed it immediately. I watched them laugh together while Ryan handed her a gift bag. Whatever he said made her throw her head back and laugh harder than I had heard her laugh in months. Standing there holding a drink, I suddenly felt like a stranger observing someone else's marriage. Several friends exchanged awkward glances. One of my cousins quietly walked over and asked if I was okay. I nodded and brushed it off, but inside, something felt very wrong. This wasn't just nostalgia. This was something deeper, something neither of them seemed interested in hiding. As the evening continued, Megan spent more and more time with Ryan. They sat together during dinner. They shared private conversations. They wandered onto the balcony overlooking the river for nearly 20 minutes while guests remained inside. Every time I approached, Megan seemed annoyed by the interruption. At one point, I asked if she wanted to join me for a photo with friends. She barely looked at me before saying, "Later." Later never came. Instead, she returned to Ryan's side almost immediately. The humiliation wasn't loud. Nobody openly mocked me. But there is a unique kind of pain that comes from watching your spouse choose someone else repeatedly while pretending you shouldn't be bothered by it. By that point, half the room had started noticing the pattern. Conversations grew quieter whenever Megan and Ryan walked past. People weren't blind. They saw exactly what was happening. Then came the moment that changed everything. The birthday cake had just been brought out, and everyone gathered near the center of the room. Guests were singing while phones recorded videos. I stood beside Megan, trying to focus on the celebration. Then Ryan stepped closer and made some joke that caused her to laugh. Without thinking, Megan reached for him. Not a handshake, not a casual touch. She grabbed his arm and leaned against him affectionately right in front of everyone. The room immediately went silent. The singing stopped awkwardly. Several guests looked away. Others stared openly. Megan didn't even seem to realize what she had done. Or maybe she didn't care. Either way, that was the moment something inside me finally broke. Not with anger. Not with rage. With clarity. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't create a scene. Instead, I quietly stepped away. While everyone remained distracted by the uncomfortable silence, I grabbed my jacket from a nearby chair and headed toward the exit. A few friends noticed and looked concerned, but nobody stopped me. Honestly, I think they understood. Outside, the cool night air felt strangely peaceful. For the first time in months, I wasn't trying to explain away behavior that clearly hurt me. I got into my car and drove home alone. No dramatic goodbye. No confrontation. Just silence. On the drive back, my phone buzzed several times, but I ignored it. Whatever was happening at that party was no longer my responsibility to manage. For years, I had protected Megan from the consequences of her choices. Tonight, she was finally going to face them herself. According to multiple guests who later told me what happened, the atmosphere inside the venue completely changed after I left. People started asking questions. Friends who had stayed silent for years suddenly spoke up. My sister reportedly asked Megan why she thought it was acceptable to treat her husband that way at his own birthday party. Another guest questioned why Ryan had even been invited. The uncomfortable whispers quickly turned into direct conversations. Megan tried laughing everything off at first, insisting everyone was overreacting. But the more she defended herself, the worse things became. Guests began leaving early. Some said goodbye politely. Others didn't bother. The celebration she worked so hard to create was slowly collapsing around her, and for the first time, she couldn't blame me for any of it. The biggest blow came from someone she never expected. Her own mother. Apparently, after watching the entire evening unfold, she pulled Megan aside and spoke to her privately. Later, Megan admitted that conversation devastated her. Her mother told her she had spent the entire night treating Ryan like a partner while treating her husband like an inconvenience. She told Megan she should be ashamed of herself. Coming from anyone else, those words might have been easier to dismiss. Coming from her mother, they hit like a truck. By that point, Ryan had quietly disappeared from the party altogether. The attention and excitement he brought vanished the moment things became uncomfortable. Meanwhile, Megan was left standing alone, watching guests leave one after another. Around midnight, my phone finally started ringing non-stop. Text messages poured in. Calls followed immediately afterward. The first messages sounded defensive, then confused, then desperate. Please answer. Can we talk? I made a mistake. Eventually, one message stood out from the rest. It simply said, I didn't realize how bad it looked until everyone started leaving. Reading that sentence hurt more than I expected, because it revealed something painful. Megan hadn't been worried about hurting me. She became worried only after other people noticed. For years, I had quietly tolerated disrespect. Tonight, the audience finally saw what I had been living with, and suddenly, she couldn't pretend it wasn't happening anymore. When Megan came home later that night, she looked completely different from the confident woman who had left earlier. Her makeup was smudged. Her eyes were red from crying. The excitement she felt around Ryan was gone. In its place was regret. Real regret. She apologized repeatedly, but neither of us spoke much. Some damage doesn't happen in a single moment. It builds slowly over years until one event finally exposes everything. The price Megan paid that night wasn't public embarrassment. It wasn't a ruined party. It was realizing that respect, once lost, is incredibly difficult to rebuild. And as she sat across from me in complete silence, she finally understood something she should have known all along. The husband she took for granted had quietly reached the end of his patience, and everyone had witnessed exactly why.